Chapter 136. 2. Frankly expressed goodwill. The weak and frail-looking woman, seated at the back of the hall, dug at her ear lazily, her eyes gazing indifferently at the tall and burly youth with a fiery temperament. It was just a casual and indifferent glance, and the youth who had been in such a rage suddenly went quiet, his body subconsciously retreating back a step. The woman's eyes are just too terrifying. Xiao Wei smiled without mirth as she curled up the edges of her lips and said, "This woman calls the shots here in this place, and this woman can jolly well decide who she wants to let the rooms out to. Didn't you see how courteous that little young lady was? This woman finds her highly pleasing to the eye. As for the rest of you here, this woman is now unhappy with all of you, and you can all now either choose to leave, or to pay twice the price to stay here. You are free to do as you please. You are just too much. This is supposed to be accommodation the Faint Mist sect has arranged for us, and not only are you chasing us out here, you are asking for 2 times the price as payment. Aren't you afraid that the Faint Mist sect will come down hard on you?" Someone shouted loudly in indignance. Xiao Wei blinked her eyes innocently like she had just heard a joke. "Come down hard on me? We'll see who in the Faint Mist sect will dare to." Those taunting words thrown out in challenge immediately rendered all the youths speechless, but there was nothing they could do about it. They really wanted to lash out to teach this audacious woman a good lesson, but not to mention the fact that the woman's cultivation was too profound to be read. The man standing beside her was tall and muscular, looking like an immovable tower. Just by standing there without moving, he was intimidating enough to make all of them not dare to take a single step forward, looking every inch a person not to be trifled with. If they were not careful, they might very well stumble into a steel wall and stand to lose more than there was to gain. They could not afford to stir up trouble here, or they can forget about taking part in the Faint Mist sect's recruitment trials. There was nothing they could do but to bear the pain of paying twice the amount of money to stay at the inn. Qingyu watched the entire farce with amusement, and then returned back to her room. Although it was said that the conditions in the inn was crude, but it was not really entirely unbearable. The beds were hardwood boards, and Yen Shiwu and Yen Shiro, who were so used to sleeping on soft mattresses and fluffy blankets, could not help but to find it a little hard to get used to. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. But fortunately for them, after the experience they had in Hell's Canyon and the recent months of training they underwent, they were able to bear up better under the hardship. They were only going to stay in here for 2 nights, and it would be over before they knew it. Qingyu, regarding the proprietress. After a little bit of packing in the room, Yin Shiro sat by the bed and suddenly asked. She had always been a little more meticulous in thought, and she had naturally noticed that Qingyu had intentionally befriended that woman. Although she could not say that she understood Qingyu very well, but she knew that the young lady was warm only on the surface and was cold inside, an aloof person deep in her bones, and also haughty and arrogant. Hence, there must be a reason for her actions. Yen Shiwu, on the other hand, was carefree and happy-go-lucky, so she had not given it any thought at all. The fact that the inn was situated in such a desolate and remote place just made one wonder how the place was able to survive. Moreover, besides the lady innkeeper herself, there were only 4 other waiters, so if they were to encounter any robbers, it could be said that they were completely defenseless, much less mention how they could possibly continue to run a business to earn money here. Chapter 136. 3. Frankly expressed goodwill among those few people. Not a single one of them was as simple as they looked. Hearing that, Qingyu only looked at the others to say, "Anyway, it is almost nightfall and all of you better keep an eye out at night. Do not sleep too deeply." Her words were a little baffling, but they have all grown used to trusting her, and they did not probe any further. They just quietly kept an eye open when they slept, not even removing their outer robes. Night was approaching, and the weather in that deep autumn was extremely cold, especially in that inn nestled among the mountains. It was so cold no one was able to sleep soundly, and it did not help even when they hid themselves under the thick cover of their blankets. It only warmed up slightly when they summoned up a bit of their spirit powers, and with the moonlight streaming in from outside the window, they could see that a thin layer of frost had formed. Yan Shiwu did not eat that night as dinner was just a couple of coarse plain buns and several unappetizing dishes. She had lost her appetite just by looking at them and had buried her head under the blanket to go to sleep. But now, she had been awakened by a shiver from the cold and felt her tummy drumming up a symphony of emptiness. Feeling so hungry she was no able to sleep at all. She was regretting it now and thought that she should have at least eaten something at least for dinner. But even if she wanted a plain bun now, they would be too hard to even bite into. Qingyu was not sleeping as she sat cross-legged in bed. Hearing the soft groans and sighs raised in complaint from Yan Shiwu, she opened her eyes and said softly, "What's wrong?" Yan Shiwu had not thought that Qingyu would suddenly speak, and she was jolted by a shock. She then said in a rather embarrassed voice, I'm a little hungry." Qingyu tossed her a ripe red apple. "Eat this." Yan Shiwu caught it reflexively, and then asked in a puzzled voice, "Where did you get this?" "The proprietress gave it to me. If you are hungry, there's more here." Yan Shiwu looked over to her and saw a plate of apples placed on the table. They were all big and red, and there was also a plate of snacks beside them. She was rather surprised. The lady boss looks like she loves money as much as life. To think that she is willing to prepare this for all the rooms. It must have cost her quite a tidy sum. Qingyu arched up an eyebrow. "Only our room has it." Yan Shiwu became even more surprised. "You are well acquainted with the lady boss?" Qingyu shook her head. "Money makes the world go round. She accepted the core crystal of a level 6 spirit beast from me. Hence she would naturally take extra good care of us. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yan Shiwu bit into the apple with a crunch and said as she chewed, "You're chomp chomp, quite clever." Qingyu smiled and did not give any further response. After hearing Yan Shiwu chomp down a good half of an apple, Yan Shiwu suddenly paused in her actions and called her name. "Qingyu." Qingyu then lifted her eyes to look at her. Yan Shiwu took another bite out of the apple and chewed noisily before swallowing as she contemplated how she was going to phrase her words. A good while passed before she then said, "In the past, I might not have been all that friendly to you. You know the kind of character I am, willful and unreasonable, but I am actually not a bad person at heart." Chapter 136. 4. Frankly expressed goodwill. Qingyu had not expected her to say such words all of a sudden, and she merely curved the ends of her lips up to respond with a simple, I bullied you and Little Bei in the past because Yenning Luo was always bullying me and second sis, using her position as the eldest daughter and her status as a princess. Although she did not outright abuse us physically or verbally, but she was always intentionally and unintentionally trying to humiliate and shame us in order to portray her superiority and noble status. Yan Shiwu then bit viciously into her apple to vent out the rage she was feeling inside. "I was feeling unbalanced, and that was why I went to bully you guys. I know that what I did was wrong, but my character was just like that. At times rather irritating and not exactly smart as in the brain as well." Yan Shiwu paused for a while, and her eyes were shining slightly. "Although they all say that Yenning Luo is the Green Wave's most prodigious lady, I feel that you are so much more talented than her. Moreover, you are also more beautiful than she is, although you are very bad at times as well, making fun of me and scaring me. But you have never really done anything against me. You are so intelligent, and if you had really wanted to do something to me, I think I would have died more times than I can count. You are not a vicious and scheming woman like Yenning Luo, who puts herself up above everyone, so that people would not realize how deeply she schemes against others. I have come to think that you are rather nice at times. At least when I'm hungry, you will give me something to eat. I've decided that I will listen to you from now on, and will not oppose you anymore." After saying that, she went on to lower her head shyly, afraid that Qingyu would laugh at her. But after a good while has passed, there was still no response. Her brows creased up, and she was just about to say something, when Qingyu suddenly said in a soft voice that was tinged with slight mirth, "Aren't you being rather smart now? I had thought that you were completely heartless, and did not realize it at all." Yan Shiwu raised her head up in surprise. You do not hold anything against me for all the things I have done to you in the past?" Qingyu then replied with a laugh. Just like you said, if I really want to settle the scores with you, you would have died an uncountable number of times by now. Yan Shiwu blushed slightly, but she was greatly moved by what Qing Yu had said. She hesitated coyly for a while before she slowly came to ask, "Then, why did you not do anything against me before? Is it because you felt that I really wasn't that mean at heart?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qing Yu lifted an eyebrow with an indiscernible smile on her face. "Actually, I am someone who bears grudges at times." "Then why?" Her long slanted phoenix-like eyes looked highly amused. "I did not really hold it against you, because I felt that competing with someone with an immature mind would make it seem like I am bullying a little child." As she thought, all the good feelings she had felt coming from the young lady were all highly misconceived. Chapter 137. 1. Someone died. She had probably been ravenous with hunger, as Yan Shiwu felt full only after having eaten 2 whole apples, and went to sleep satisfied. Things were peaceful and uneventful here on this side, but for all the others staying at the same inn who had come to take part in the recruitment trials, it was not known whether they were hallucinating, but they were feeling that the temperature seemed to become colder and colder as they lay in their beds. At first, they were all sleeping by themselves on their own beds, and then it became 2 or 3 of them squeezing themselves together, the blankets piled thickly together over them, but they were still trembling with cold. It did not help even when they gathered their spirit energies in their bodies, their faces turning pale as they froze. Why do I feel so cold?" A young girl's teeth chattered as she asked the other young girl sticking close just beside her. The girl named was also trembling severely as she lifted her eyes to look out the window. "Has it started to snow?" As she spoke, she crawled out from under the blanket with much difficulty, thinking to open the window to see outside. In the end, she accidentally knocked over the teapot on the table while walking over there, and the little half of the tea inside the pot spilled onto the floor. In that instant, the tea quickly froze at a speed visible to the naked eye, as a frosty mist emanated from it. The 2 girls immediately stared with their eyes widened, gasping in shock. The girl on the bed suddenly broke into tears, crying softly, sad and afraid. "Boo-hoo-hoo. What kind of a scary place are we in here? We'll surely die here. Boo-hoo. I want to go home." "Stop that. Stop crying," admonished softly, and then waved her hand to light the candle in the room, which brightened up a portion of the room. But the light from the fluttering flame made the room alternate between light and in darkness, the flame extremely weak, like it would go out at any moment. The girl stopped her sobbing weakly. Tears welled up in her eyes as she looked at the other girl. "Then what should we do now?" Knitted up her brows, and was just about to say something when she heard a shrill scream rang out next door. A flurry of footsteps immediately followed that was accompanied by a girl's terrified scream. "Eek! Someone died!" With such a big commotion, everyone was alerted. They had all not been able to sleep because it was too cold, and now that someone has been killed, they all broke out in cold sweat from shock. Yan Shiwu woke up still feeling groggy, and saw that Qing Yu and the others have already woken up. She rubbed her eyes and sat up. "What happened out there? Why is it so noisy?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Seems like someone died. Yan Shiro sighed inwardly, thinking that this fella here was really taking things so easy. It was thought that she was the only one who could fall asleep. What? Yan Shiwu's eyes widened in surprise. She had originally still been feeling rather sleepy, but she was now fully awake. She immediately flipped off her blanket and climbed out of bed. How could someone die so suddenly? Should we go take a look? We were just about to wake you, Qing Yu said as she looked at her indifferent glance. Chapter 137. 2. Someone died. Seeing that, Yan Shiwu rubbed her nose, slightly embarrassed. The commotion had come from the innermost room on the second floor, and everyone was gathered there at that moment. The place jammed packed with people as sounds of angry argument rang out from inside. How did such a thing happen? He was fine when we spoke earlier, and he is now suddenly dead. How would I now? I was feeling cold, and was going to brew a hot pot of tea. I had just lit the candle when I saw this fella staring at me from his bed. The blood spilled over the entire bed. Why are you looking at me like this? You couldn't possibly be suspecting that I killed him, do you? There are no grudges between us, so why would I want to kill him? The two of you were arguing earlier just today, and if not for the fact that everyone pulled the two of you back, you guys would have gone at each other's throats. You must be joking. This fella has such a bad temper, and heaven knows how many people he has offended on his way here. Why are you suspecting me now? He even went on to quarrel with the lady boss of this in front of everyone. So why don't you say that the lady boss bore a grudge and secretly came to kill him in the middle of the night? Upon hearing the loud argument, everyone then realized that the person who died was the tall and brawny hot-headed youth they had all seen earlier that afternoon. The crowd parted slightly at that moment, and the scene inside the room could be seen. The youth's eyes were open in a wide stare, and he had a large hole opened in his abdomen. Bright red blood stained the entire bed, and had also spilled onto the floor, a highly grisly sight. Someone within the surrounding crowd whispered softly, "Such a pitiful sight. Just how great was the grievance?" Sigh, it's little wonder. The kid always had such a fiery temper, and he doesn't hold back on his words at all. Maybe he crossed somebody before and did not know it. Now retribution caught up with him. But that is just too brutal. The wound on his stomach is really not small at all, and he died with his eyes open. He must have been in great agony when he died. Disaster really does stem from one's mouth. Hearing these people debate, it seemed like everyone has already decided that the culprit was really the youth, who was still arguing vehemently. Qingyu stood at the back of the crowd, her gaze looking at the youth who died with unresolved grievance. Her eyes darkened when she noticed something strange about the wound, where the edges looked highly uneven, seemingly caused by a sharp weapon. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. It looked like something had torn his stomach out, biting through his body. You all cannot just make such wild accusations. The eyes of the youth whom everyone thought was the killer had turned red. With so many fingers being pointed right at him, even though he was a little scared, he still stubbornly gritted his teeth, unwilling to lower his head. Lan Yu, what happened? A gentle female voice rang out suddenly. With a white fox fur coat draped over her back, a slim-figured young girl suddenly came walking over. The young girl was very pretty, her tiny face almost the size of a palm, enchanting, looking so very weak and frail. Chapter 137. 3. Someone died. The youth looked as if he had just seen his savior, and his voice was immediately rather choked up. I did not kill anyone. I believe that you did not kill anyone, said reassuringly, and her eyes then turned to gaze indifferently upon the overbearing man who had been accusing Lan Yu. What proof do you have that Lan Yu killed the man? He almost got into a fight with Cheng Hui earlier in the day, and many people witnessed it. Isn't that enough proof that he did it? The youth said with a scornful snort. If you did not see it with your own eyes, do not slander others as you please. The expression on Yi's face was still a little cold. For such a frail and gentle-looking girl, she actually looked a little commanding when her face turned stern. The youth was infuriated when he heard that, and he then said in a demeaning tone, "What kind of a relationship do you have with this kid? A little girl like you had better not come stick your nose into men's affairs. You might invite unwanted trouble upon yourself. Lan Yu is my friend, and I know him very well. Although he might be rather rash at times, but he has a kind heart, and would never go kill anyone just because of a few heated words. But this young master here, on the other hand, you seem to be highly insistent on forcing Lan Yu to admit to the crime, and is misleading everyone here, trying make everyone think that Lan Yu is the one who killed him. This woman is being just too unreasonable. Why would I want to do that?" The man retorted angrily. Curved up the ends of her lips in a smile and said, "Then, what does it have to do with Lan Yu?" Her gaze then swung around, measuring up the surrounding crowd. "Everyone must not forget that we have to stay her in this inn for 1 day and 1 night. If anyone is to stir up any trouble within this period, the person will be disqualified from taking part in the Faint Mist Sect's recruitment trials. I will naturally not mind having one less opponent during the trials." After saying that, she turned to the youth whose face was still a little pale, and said directly to him, Lan Yu, come with me. We have an empty bed in our room, and you can sleep there for the time being. Having come out from home, they couldn't afford to be too strict and unbending. It was common for men and women to stay under the same roof, and it was no longer a strange thing to see. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. But someone has died here. Are they really going to treat it as if nothing has happened? You fellas hold it right there. The man shouted in a fit. Aren't you going to give everyone an explanation for this incident? Halted in her steps, and then slowly turned her eyes around. That glance was completely emotionless. Lan Yu did not kill him, and there is nothing he needs to explain for. Moreover, the person who died is not your parents or sibling, so nobody owes you an explanation as well. Everyone was stumped, unable to find anything to say. Things were really like what she said, and there was nothing they could pick on. The man had seemed like he still wanted to argue about something, but suddenly turned, shot a dim-eyed glance at him. Although one's status or position matters not after we get into the faint mist sect, but the Ming family of the Soul Cultivators tribe are not people that all of you here can willfully offend. Chapter 137. 4. Someone died. Once those words came out, everyone was overcome with shock. No wonder such a weak and frail-looking young lady like this could possess such an absorbing air about her, one that made it impossible to people to overlook. So it was because she was a person from the mysterious Soul Cultivator tribe. Because people from the Soul Cultivator tribe practices mainly soul techniques, they possessed extremely strong mind powers. It was because of this that their people fell into two extremes. The strong their soul powers were, the weaker their bodies were. But there were exceptions to that. A small number of them did not suffer from frail bodies, even though they possessed mighty mind powers. But it was clear to see that this young lady did not look like she was in the best of health, and the pallor on her face was rather sickly pale. Until they have walked a good distance away, the people then started to discuss heatedly. As for the youth who died, no one really cared about the reason he had been killed any longer, as he wasn't really that important a person anyway, but had mindlessly gone on to offend others. So his death was no great loss to anyone. A good number of people die in these lands on a daily basis, and incompetent people like this just deserves it. Qing Yu turned to look with interest in the direction the young lady had disappeared in. The Soul Cultivator tribe. To think that she was able to meet them, and she was really feeling quite curious. It was not known if it was all just psychological, but after returning back to their rooms, it did not feel quite as cold anymore. Hiding back under their blankets, warmth returned to their bodies, and it felt rather toasty. That had made the bunch of young people, who had not been able to sleep well throughout the night, to become grateful that they would not be freezing to death that night. And when they came back to their room, Qing Yu was trailing a step behind the others when she heard voices, and came to discover that the young lady earlier was staying in the room right across theirs. The sound of their conversation came drifting out from inside. I really am so thankful you were there. If not for you, I might be branded as a murderer now. This was Lan Yu's voice. No need to thank me. Just remember this lesson well, and do not be so hot-headed anymore. Otherwise, if you come to be made use of by others again, I will not help you again. Yi's voice sounded a little helpless. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Lan Yu laughed a little foolishly. Who asked you to be so clever that I do not even have to use my brains when I'm with you? But you're really very good. Here you are, a girl younger than I am, but you have such a commanding presence, which must have intimidated all those people back there. People from the Soul Cultivator tribe must not be bullied by outsiders. You must remember this well. Yi's voice was determined, and she then broke out into a bout of suppressed coughing, and the sounds of frantic heaving breathing could be heard right after, which lasted a good while before it stopped. Are you all right? Are you feeling very uncomfortable? Qian Yun, go fetch the medicine quickly. Cough cough. It's no use. I will be fine after a while. Just as she said, after a few moments, the coughing and the sound of heaving breath stopped. Chapter 138. 1. Worming in closer. Your body is so weak and it is so freezing cold here at night. Your body will not be able to withstand it. That was a girl's worried voice. And it must be Qian Yun whom Lan Yu had just called out to earlier. I'm fine. The two of you should go get some rest. Day will be breaking in just a little while. Yi said softly, and did not say anything else after that. After Qin Yu listened in to their conversation, the corners of her lips raised up slightly. Just as she was about to go into her room, a tall and slim figure came walking slowly up from downstairs, who then noticed her standing there and smiled at her. Young lady, not sleeping so late at night, and came out for a stroll? Hearing that, the curve at the ends of Qin Yu's lips deepened. With such a big commotion earlier when someone died, she seemed to be completely unaware of it. Big sister Wei, someone died just some moments ago. Qin Yu said softly, watching the woman's expression. It's that youth who argued with you earlier in the day. Upon hearing what she said, Xiao Wei lifted an eyebrow very calmly. Oh, I see. I'll someone to clean it up. A person died, an absolutely normal occurrence. Qin Yu leaned against the railing with an indiscernible smile. It is indeed nothing all that strange, but I am rather curious why there was such a large wound on the person's body, like his abdomen had been completely cut open. Could he have been sleepwalking and cut himself up that led to his death? But it was such a large wound, so what kind of a weapon could have caused it? Listening to her words, Xiao Wei looked at her smilingly and said, throughout the years in here, strange incidents happens on and off. It's fine once you get used to it. Be good and go get some sleep. No need to worry about it so much. Seeing that she was not going to get anything out of Xiao Wei, Qin Yu gave a shrug of her shoulders and turned around to go into her room. Sis Wei, the little lass seems to have realized something. The towering man who was never seen away from her said in a deep gruff voice. Xiao Wei gave a light laugh and replied, the lass is the smartest one among them all. We will not be able to hide it from her for long. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. The man was silent for a while before he went on to say, did we act too soon? With this incident tonight, they would all surely be on their guards now. You are overestimating them. No matter how prepared they are. With this batch, less than half of them will make it till the admission trials. Xiao Wei said with a contemptuous smile, and then raised her eyes to gaze into the cold moonlight shining down outside. Her lips curved up meaningfully and she said to the man, there is still another day and night. The next day, everyone woke up early. Seeing the sun risen up high in the sky, it brought a sliver of sunny warmth into the still chilly morning. It felt like everything had been a dream, unable to even imagine all that had happened last night, with that unbelievably freezing temperature, and the strange circumstances that a person had died under. Chapter 138. 2. Warming and closer breakfast was very simple. A bowl of steaming hot plain porridge, a plain bun the size of one's palm, and also a dish of crunchy vegetables. It was probably due to the torment they experienced yesterday that not a single person complained, with everyone slurping it all down greedily. Seeing that scene, the ends of Qiao Wei's mouth lifted slightly. These brats have learned to behave. Lady boss, can we go to the Faint Mist sect early? A pretty and demure young woman suddenly asked. Xiao Wei was clicking on the abacus behind the counter, and she did not even raise her head up when she replied. The rules say that the entrance will not open before the appointed time. The young woman pouted her lips, looking a little aggrieved. But it is really too cold here at night, and there isn't any warmer around. What if we freeze to death here? Xiao Wei curled up her lips in a sneer and glanced at her. If all of you are not able to withstand this little bit of cold, then there isn't really much meaning in you continuing to live at all. How can you speak like that to me? The young woman almost burst into tears in anger, suddenly regretting coming here with her companions. Someone beside her pulled the aggrieved young woman aside and shot her a warning glance before saying to her, have you forgotten what happened to that guy last night? Wasn't he being disrespectful to the lady boss yesterday, and he was found dead that very night? The young woman's eyes widened in fear, and she immediately clamped up. But how could that hushed whisper ever hope to escape Qiao Wei's ears? She could not help but smile quietly to herself. Did they think that she had killed that person with her own hands? What a joke! If she had really struck, would these brats even come to discover anything was amiss? What a bunch of foolish kids. All of you are free to move around nearby today, to get yourself familiar with the terrain here. But remember to not roam too far, or if you come to encounter any danger, I cannot guarantee I will be able to get there in time. So you will have to be responsible for the consequences yourselves. Xiao Wei said that with a smile, and then got up lazily to go get some sleep in the back. What a cold-hearted woman. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Lan Yu was taking bites out of the plain bun in his hand, as he looked at the young woman seated across from him and said, should we send a homing pigeon to the young lord asking him to come get us? Otherwise I fear. Before he had even finished his words, his intention was already clear to see. This and that exuded a strange and mysterious air, was not a place they should remain in any longer. They were worried that they might very well end up dead for no reason in this place, before the day for the admission trials came. The young lord of the Soul Cultivators tribe was the most outstanding disciple of the Soul Mastery Department, and was a leading entity in the Faint Mist sect. He possessed powerful cultivation, was highly valued, and also Yi's elder brother. He had always doted in this younger sister of his, and if he knew that they were facing such difficulties here, he would definitely lend a hand in assistance. Chapter 138. 3. Worming in closer, Yi still had the fox fur cape wrapped around her, and her face was a little pale as she leaned back in the chair to rest. Hearing those words, her eyes filled up with displeasure as she stared at Lan Yu and said in a low voice, "My elder brother already has a lot on his plate to deal with every day. How can I make him worry about a small matter like this? It will be time in less than a day more, and it'll quickly pass once we grit our teeth and endure it." Having been lectured, Lan Yu did not say anything else, but lowered his head to eat silently. Qing Yu then turned her eyes back to the table, but the moment she turned back around, she was immediately met with several other pairs of eyes looking at her thoughtfully. "What?" Qing Yu raised an eyebrow. "A flower bloomed on my face?" Qing Bei shook his head and glanced at the few people at the table behind. "Why do I feel that you seem to hold quite an interest in them?" Qing Yu smiled, and then leaned in closer to say softly to him, "You remember me telling you that you have strong soul powers?" "I remember that." Qing Bei nodded his head. "But what does that have to do with what she's doing here?" "Those few fellas are from the main family of the Soul Cultivators tribe. And if my memory serves me correctly, the Soul Cultivators tribe's Ming family bloodline has produced two very rare prodigies with extremely powerful soul powers. One of them is the Soul Cultivators tribe's young lord Ming Jing. The other one is their most beloved little princess of the Soul Cultivators tribe, Ming Yi." Qing Yu said slowly, as her lips curved up at the corners. And Qing Bei had a smart and quick mind, dazed for just a moment before he quickly came to react. "And that young lady there is the Soul Cultivators tribe's little princess, Ming Yi?" "That's right," Qing Yu said with a disarming smile. "She seems to be a little sickly in health, and I am contemplating how I should worm my way in closer." Qing Bei was speechless. The way she looked now was exactly like a crafty scheming fox. She was always putting up an aloof front, her demeanor cold, and keeping people at arm's length. But whenever she started scheming against someone, this sly and black-bellied look she gave made her look like a completely different person. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Once out of the inn, overlapping mountain ranges stretched to the horizon as far as the eye could see, cloudy mist swirling around them. No one knew which one of those mountains was actually hiding the entrance into the Faint Mist sect. The terrain was complicated and treacherous, the mountain roads winding and countless in number, so one could easily get lost. So everyone kept Xiao Wei's words in mind, and did not roam too far away, moving mostly together in groups, so that they could at least look out for one another. Very coincidentally, Qing Yu and her group walked together with Ming Yi and her companions when they met each other outside the inn, which led them to walk together. Ming Yi was naturally able to recognize Qing Yu. When they were here on the very first day, this young lady had stood out so strongly. Regardless whether it was in demeanor or looks, the young lady was just too unforgettable. But as Yi was born with a more introverted personality, and used to taking the initiative to go strike up a conversation, She just nodded politely at the young lady, and then went on walking on her own in front. Chapter 138. 4. Worming in closer. Though Yan Shiwu was usually quite dense and insensitive, but she seemed to have noticed something as well this time. She tugged at Qing Yu's sleeve discreetly. "Hey, are you secretly tailing that girl?" Qing Yu glanced at her sharply. "Is that how you use the term tailing?" Yan Shiwu was stumped for words, and it was a while before she found her voice. "Anyway, I just seem to feel that you are purposely following them. You aren't stupid after all." Qing Yu then responded. The seasonal climate in the Green Wave Kingdom was the most gentle. By this time, other places had already started to snow, but it was just a little chilly there, and people were just wearing winter clothing of regular thickness. But in front of them, the thin-figured young lady was wrapped up especially thickly. The fox fur she had clad around her was high-grade clothing that kept out the chill extremely well, and it would seemingly be still too early to use that now in this climate. But even though the young lady had that wrapped around her, her tiny face had turned pale from the cold, with no color in her lips. She clutched her cape tightly around her body, her steps under her feet quick. Kuan Yin in green clothes quickly caught up from behind. Where are you going? We cannot walk too far from here, otherwise what are we going to do if we cannot find our way back?" Ming Yi's lips were pressed tightly together, and her voice was a little hoarse. "Help me find the Crimson Sand Viper." The footsteps of Kuan Yin and Lan Yu immediately stopped in their spots. "What are you thinking of doing? I cannot withstand it much longer." The young lady was so pale her face was completely white, and her lips were stained red from her biting down on them. "The blood of the Crimson Sand Viper can help alleviate my condition." Have you lost your mind? The Crimson Sand Viper has highly lethal poison." Qian Yun's eyes had become red-rimmed, and she suddenly said in a low shout, "You cannot do that. I am going to send word to the young lord. We cannot stay another moment here in this hellish place. If anything happens to you here today, then we'll not be able to answer for it even with our very lives." As she spoke, she pulled out something from within her robes, and was just about to crush it when Ming Yi suddenly turned around, her eyes tinged with an iciness. "You dare to defy my orders. But you're—" "I said that I'm fine. Do not go worry my elder brother with every little thing," Ming Yi said through tightly clenched teeth, spitting out each word one at a time. Qian Yun closed her eyes and her arms slumped down in defeat. The expression on her face was sorrowful, like it was rather painful for her, and she was finding it hard to bear. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Finally, a quick fleeting flash of red zoomed past, and Lan Yu very nimbly caught it in his hand. His hand clutched around the 7-inch spot below its head as he brought it up before Ming Yi. Although he was well aware of the fact that the Crimson Sand Viper was born with fiery fire poison, but this was the only way to counter the ice that sealed her heart. If not for the fact that they were left with no other choice, how could they possibly be willing to do something so savage as to devour the raw blood of beasts and fowl? But she wanted to live on. She gripped her hands around the snake's body and was just about to sever its main artery and drink its blood when a pebble suddenly struck the back of her hand. Shocked by the hit, she released her grip, and the Crimson Sand Viper slithered speedily away in a blink. Ming Yi's eyes darkened, and they became chillingly bloodthirsty. Chapter 139. 1. Trials quietly held Qian Yun had actually not been all that willing to see Yi drink the snake's blood, so when she saw the snake slither away, she heaved an inward sigh of relief, but then grew rather fearful, because she knew that Yi hated people who came to interfere with anything that she wanted to do the most. Although she usually looked rather frail and weak most of the time, but as the next most powerful soul master after the soul cultivator's tribe, she was never someone soft that did others' bidding. On the contrary, her temper wasn't all that good, especially when her illness stuck. She could be said to be brutal and ruthless. The methods that soul masters employed to kill a person was a lot more terrifying than most other martial arts practitioners. Qian Yun could not help but silently pitied the person who had moved to stop Ming Yi. Right in that instant, Ming Yi's sinisterly cold eyes were staring unwaveringly at the person who had suddenly appeared and she said in a chilling voice, "You have been tailing me." That person was Qingyu, dressed in full white, looking especially harmless and innocent. Towards the sinisterly cold haze the young lady was staring at her with. Qingyu did not seem to be bothered in the least as she laughed softly and said, "Not true. I'm merely saving your life." "Save my life?" Ming Yi's expression was becoming more and more dangerous, like she was right on the verge of exploding into rage. Qingyu shook her head and sighed aloud, her tone of voice seemingly filled with pity and regret. "I just don't want you to bring ruin upon yourself. You're actually an exceptionally outstanding soul master. Don't you know that if you drink this snake's blood here today, you'll not be able to break the addiction that would consume you henceforth, and turn into a monster that could not live without more of its blood?" "That's none of your business," Ming Yi said coldly, like she already knew that the consequences would be such. Qingyu curved up the ends of her mouth. "It is indeed not really my business, but I was thinking, what if that brother of yours who loves his younger sister so fiercely were to find out that the precious little sister he holds so protectively dear in the palm of his hand had been forced out of the soul cultivator's tribe and driven to have no choice but to drink the blood of the crimson sand viper to suppress the ice poison inside her, turned into a person who is neither man nor ghost. I am afraid that he might just lose his mind in a fit of rage and embark on a rampage of unstoppable massacre." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Ming Yi's eyes constricted. "How do you know?" "I will of course know all that because I can save you from this fate," Qingyu said with a disarming smile as she slowly walked in closer to Ming Yi, her full white clothes lending an air seemingly like that of a deity onto her, adding to that exceptionally alluring face of beauty that was impossible to overlook. Qian Yun stood in front of Ming Yi protectively, as she stared warily at the young lady coming closer to them a step at a time. Behind her, Ming Yi struggled to lift her hand up to push Qian Yun away before she said, "What is your real motive here?" She was naturally not so naive to think that this young lady was just being kind. Although she did not know the young lady, she could tell with just one glance that the young lady was the same as her, an extremely cold and unfeeling nature that ran deep inside their bones. A person who would not want to save her for no good reason. Chapter 139. 2. Trials quietly held Ming Yi's petite small face had already turned green from the chill, but she was still forcefully bracing herself from collapsing. If this young lady was really able to save her life, then she would be willing to pay any price, no matter what it cost her. She must not die. Yet. Qingyu's eyes flashed with momentary surprise. This girl has a very strong will, a will that yearned to live so unbelievably strongly. Her pair of X-ray eyes that were meant to save people's life could at that moment clearly see inside the young lady's body, that was fully riddled with countless old ailments. That young heart that should be beating energetically was extraordinarily weak, a layer of icy frost encrusted around it. If not for that fiercely strong will that longed to live so much to brace her, she feared that the young lady would have already turned into a frozen icicle by now. Qingyu had been here in this other world for quite a number of years already, but she had never seen such a strange and peculiar affliction. To be able to live when her heart was encased in ice, it was such an absolute miracle. She grabbed the young lady's thin and frail-looking hand and poured her golden red elixir fire into the young lady's icy cold body, dispersing the chill inside in an instant. The icy frost around her heart was melting at a visible rate, and it began to beat strongly. Qian Yun and Lan Yu stood there with their eyes wide and their mouths agape. For so many years, it was the first time that they were seeing the always pale and sickly Ming Yi showing a hint of rosiness in her cheeks. "Yi, how do you feel?" Qian Yun asked excitedly as she held Ming Yi's hand. With that touch, her expression became even more surprised. "Yi, your hands. Your hands are warm to the touch." Hearing that, Lan Yu came over and placed his hand on the back of the young lady's hand. He felt a warmth under his fingers. The youth's eyes immediately turned red around the rims. "Yi, have you really recovered? You will not have to suffer any more relapses of the illness again, right?" Qingyu stood on the side with her arms folded across her chest, and she clicked her tongue before she said, That is of course not possible. She has been afflicted with ice poison for so many years. How could she possibly recover so quickly? Ming Yi was in a daze as she stared at her own hands. Under the sun's bright rays, she was able to clearly see her veins under her fair white skin. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Her hands had been covered with a thin layer of icy before, but now, it was completely clear and they were warm and dry. Her elder brother had brought in many elixir cultivators, but all those people were not able to save her. They had even told her that if her condition continued on like this, it was highly possible she would not live past 18 years. After this year, she would just be only 16, just when she was just blossoming into beauty. But all of that to her was going to be too short-lived and fleeting. So what if she was the Soul Cultivators tribe's female prodigy? If she could choose, she would rather be useless trash who did not possess any gift in cultivation at all. If she could just live. As long as she can always see her elder brother. Chapter 139. 3. Trials quietly held as she had thought. All those people were quack physicians. It was clear to see that she could be cured, right? Ming Yi then stood up from the ground, her eyes clear as autumn waters filled with resolve and traces of a plea. If you are able to cure me of my condition, then I will agree to whatever condition you might ask. She might still be hesitant and undecided before, but now that she was feeling the kind of warmth any normal human should have for the first time in her life, and did not fear the winter's chill anymore, it gave her the best proof she could ever get. You don't have to be so serious. We'll be fellow sect disciples in future, and it is only natural that we look out for each other. The ends of Qingyu's lips lifted with a smile. Having said that, she then paused for a moment before she turned to look at the young lady before her. But there really might be something that will require help from the Soul Cultivators tribe. Ming Yi nodded her head gently. You will just have to say it, and I will get it done for you. Then we've happily come to an agreement here. Qingyu said with her eyes turned into smiling arcs, almost looking a little sly. Qingbei and Yan Shiwu stood watching from a far distance, as they were afraid that they might be easily noticed if they had gone forward together as a group. So Qingyu had gone over by herself. Upon seeing Ming Yi turning misty-eyed and her face looking highly moved and grateful, Yan Shiwu raised her hand to rub her chin, before suddenly poking Qingbei in his arm. What was that for? Qingbei asked with his brows creased up. There was a rather complicated expression on Yan Shiwu's face as she asked in a low voice. Say, Qingyu is clearly doing a good deed here by saving someone's life. So why do I seem to feel that she is trying to scheme against someone instead? Tisk. Qingbei clicked his tongue, and then gave an indiscernible smile. There is no need to guess. She is indeed scheming against someone. Although he did not know what Qingyu's intentions were in getting close to those fellas from the Soul Cultivators tribe, Yan Shiro had not really shown much interest towards the matter, but she suddenly lifted her head to look up. Has she been mistaken? The sky seems to have suddenly darkened quite a bit. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. After that, Ming Yi and her group came to walk together with Qingyu and her companions. The few of them were chatting when it was not known who brought up the topic, and they were soon discussing about the youth who had mysteriously died the night before. I was in great shock at that time. That person definitely did not die at the moment when I discovered him, because the temperature was really just too cold. The blood that had flowed onto the floor had already froze, so it must have been an hour at least. Moreover, his eyes were wide open, and everyone said that was caused by extreme terror. But what I saw in his eyes was unbearable agony instead. When he died, it must have been inconceivably torturous, so I just cannot understand how come nobody noticed anything at that time. When Lan Yu related to them about last night's events, he had looked rather puzzled. People from the Soul Cultivators tribe were able to deduce the sequence of events just before a person's death by reading the expression of the victim's face. But as the other person staying in the same room as him had immediately wrongfully accused Lan Yu to be the killer, rage had filled his head at that time as he fiercely defended himself, only concerned with explaining himself, and had not taken a close look at the victim. Now that he thought about the matter, He just could not help but feel that something wasn't really right. Chapter 139. 4. Trials quietly held the topic was a little heavy, and the atmosphere became rather heavy. Seeing that, Qingyu raised an eyebrow and laughed softly. Of course no one would notice anything. Moreover, I fear that even the victim himself did not know how he died. When her voice fell, everyone uniformly turned their eyes to look at her curiously, but Qingyu took a long moment to keep them in suspense before she said in an unhurried tone. Although it is said that we are up on a mountain, but the unbelievable steep drop in temperature at night is a little too ridiculous. Haven't any of you ever wondered why that is the case? Why? Qingyu shook her head a little helplessly before turning to look at Qingbei. The youth's eyes were calm, and he was neither flustered nor nervous, seemingly not curious about what Qingyu had to say. Because of the unique gift he possessed, anything that he wanted to know about could not be hidden from him. Catching the look his sister gave him, Qingbei was merely surprised for an instant before he realized that Qingyu wanted him to explain it, as he would be able to explain it more clearly after all. Hence he opened his mouth and said slowly, "Actually, from the moment we came to set foot into the inn, the faint mist sect's admission trials had already begun." The moment his words registered, except for Qingyu who already knew that fact, even the ever-calm and composed Ming Yi had a glint of surprise show in her eyes. What did that really mean? After the great purge the faint mist sect underwent, they came to set this as the first test for the trials after discussion that was carried out with utmost secrecy, so no one knew about it at all. So what we are going through now is actually just a small test for all the several hundred people taking part in the recruitment trials. Qingbei paused for a moment as he spoke, and then continued on to say, "The person who died last night had actually lost the right to be accepted into the sect when he kicked up such a big fuss about the room allocation, and had even wanted to strike at the proprietress. As for the reason why he died, it might be because, while he was on his way here, he had cruelly killed his own companion over a highly insignificant matter, and all of this had not escaped the faint mist sect's eyes. But of course the real reason that ultimately came to lead to his death was because he had been secretly plotting to exact revenge upon the proprietress who had been so disrespectful to him." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. The proprietress Minnie seemed like a weak and defenseless woman. But have you noticed the 4 waiters she has under her command? Maybe you might not have noticed it much, but if I am to tell you their nicknames, I'm sure all of you would have at least heard of them before. Their nicknames are Great Whale Shark, Money Leopard, Arctic Snow Fox, Devil Devouring Eagle. Such well-known names. How could they possibly not heard of them before? It was said since the founding of the Faint Mist sect for the past 100 years, these were the 4 great divine beasts that guarded the sect. But it was clear to see that they were 4 humans. So why were they given names of different beast species, and were known to be divine beasts? Without delving deeper into that reason for now, just by hearing these names that were known far and wide, one would already know exactly how strong they were. How had these peerlessly powerful pugilists of legendary stature suddenly become waiters in an inn? Chapter 140. 1. A thread between life and death. It becomes so cold at night due to the hand of the Arctic snow wolf, and he's the one that killed the youth. It could be seen with just one look that those 4 were highly respectful of the proprietress. So anyone who dared to show her such discourtesy would just be seeking their own death, as those 4 people were not entirely good people themselves. After hearing Qingbei explain all that, their eyes became incredibly fevered when they came to realize that the youth could actually know so much about these well-hidden secrets. The youth was really quite an extraordinary person, but Ming Yi was looking at him with a look of surprise. "I really wonder, how did you come to know about all these matters, and even understand them in so much detail?" The youth lifted the ends of his lips to smile candidly. "I do not know why, but anything that I want to know about, it will just appear in my mind. Qingyu said that it is because I possess strong soul powers, a gift that I was born with." Ming Yi's eyes brightened, and thought that it was rather incredulous. "You are born to be a soul cultivator. Except for my brother, I have never seen a person as talented as you. Qingbei rubbed his nose shyly. That's too kind. Compared to Qingyu, he was still thousands of miles behind. Although Qingyu had always said he was very highly skilled, it was still far from enough. Ming Yi smiled lightly and said, You're just too modest. Once we get into the faint mist sect, I will tell my elder brother about you. Unknowingly, though she had just come to know them for a short period of time, Ming Yi had come to like them very much. The highly introverted girl had almost never taken the initiative to become friendly with people, and only had Qian Yuna and Lan Yu whom she was close to. This was the first time that she was opening her heart so easily to people she had just come to meet, and was treating them with so much sincerity. It was a different kind of feeling with Qian Yun and Lan Yu whom she had grown up together with, as this could be considered the first couple of friends she had come to know. Though it was said that they had come to familiarize themselves with the terrain, but they did not walk all that far out. To a person like Qingyu who had a photographic memory, she had come out merely to see if she could exchange a few words with Ming Yi. Getting to know the area and whatnot was secondary. Moreover, it was not known what else was going to happen that very night. With the weather starting to turn cold, daylight grew shorter, and time seemed to fly. Before any of them had really noticed it, the sky had already started to gradually turn dark. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. And in the night, at almost 2 times it was in the day, time felt like it passed laboriously slowly, and was more oppressive. But at the same time, under the oppressive air, they also felt like they were able to heave a sigh of relief, as after tonight, they would be able to leave this strange inn, to go take part in the Faint Mist Sect's recruitment trials. The night felt as if some terrifying wild beast lay crouching in wait, as fear blanketed over everything. Within the cold, chill air of the silent mountain, the faint light of candles could be seen flickering weakly inside. Chapter 140. 2. A thread between life and death. The darkness of the night deepened, and it was not known from when lazy snowflakes began to fall down through the air outside the windows, covering the high mountains in a layer of silvery white. The bare and desolate mountain only had that single lonely inn sitting within, looking highly obtrusive. The candlelight in the main hall wavered incessantly under the billowing winter's wind, before it finally gave a final flicker, and went out. Sheesh. I can't stand it anymore. It's so cold. Although it is said that the temperature gets lower in the mountains. But this is just too cold. Or rather, should we go ask for a fire or something from the lady boss? Someone in the room suggested, and then went shivering as he tottered over towards the door. His hand had just touched the door when he froze there, not moving an inch for a long time. Oi, what are you still dawdling there? Hurry up and go borrow a light or something already. Someone shouted impatiently as he huddled within his blanket, shivering. But the person at the door did not seem to have heard him, not to mention any form of response. But his did not even move his body a single inch. What are you really up to over there? The person on the bed got angry and climbed off from his bed despite the biting and chilly cold, like he was going to give the person standing at the door like a wooden block a good tongue lashing. Just as he came closer, a chill ran up his entire spine. In that quiet and soundless room, so silent you can even hear a pin drop, which made the soft and faint patter of something dripping sound clear and crisp, which drummed on their hearts, causing the hair on the back of their necks to stand. There were a total of 3 people in that room, and the third person had been so cold, he could not be bothered to even speak a word. But upon hearing the sound, he was a little puzzled, and unconsciously holding his breath, he asked, "What is that sound?" At that moment, the man who had gone over to the door to go borrow a light was still frozen in place with his hand on the door, but the stance of his body seemed a little too stiff, and it seemed like something was wrong, his back facing the other 2 people, where they were not able to see what had happened to him. But when the person who had climbed off his bed in impatience went to push that man's body with a nudge, a series of events happened. It was as if the sluice gates in that man's stiffened body had opened, suddenly spurting out a warm and sticky liquid that splattered all over the other person. Immediately after, that tall body crashed to the floor, laying face down, as a large amount of blood spilled in a widening pool. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. He was dead, soundlessly and without any warning. The blood spilled across almost half the room, the thick metallic stench shooting straight up their noses. The air turned heavy and stifling. The two people were so shocked by the entire scene that they even forgot to scream, their eyes staring widely with their faces white as a sheet. With the youth that had died last night, this was already the second person to die under such mysterious circumstances. They still did not know how the first youth had died, but this person had been staying in the same room together with them, and it was in just a few breaths' time that he was killed right under their very noses. Chapter 143. A thread between life and death in this inn. Was there really a murderous devilish demon up to its tricks, and going around to kill people, without anyone noticing? Fear gripped at their hearts, and they all were in such panic that they wanted to open their doors to go run outside crying for help. But it seemed like the doors had been locked from outside, and they were not able to open it no matter how hard they tried. The blizzard outside was blowing stronger and stronger, and the tightly shut window that was suddenly blown open allowed the flurries of snow to fly in, striking them right in their faces, cutting painfully like blades. The temperature in the room immediately plummeted, and the man who died froze up together with his spilt blood into ice, with countless thin and sharp icicles forming all over the walls, covering the entire room, trapping the two of them inside. The space they could still move within was growing tighter and tighter, until finally, those icicles that numbered in thousands pierced right through their bodies, sticking out through their bodies like they had been turned into porcupines. But not a single drop of blood bled from their bodies, because it had been just too cold, and all their blood had freezed up. Even up till the point of death, they had not even cried out at all, because before they could even react, they were already dead. Downstairs, Xiao Wei had a hot cup of tea in her hand. Sipping from it, she then curled up the ends of her lips before she said with a sigh, "All these brats here are still too young. To think that they even dare to come wanting to join the faint mist sect so casually. Do they really think that it is so easy to be accepted?" Behind her, the burly man who was tall as a tower hesitated a moment before he said in incomprehension, "For those few fellas? Just a bunch of reprehensible fugitives on the run, who have committed all kinds of heinous deeds. Did they really think that they would be able to muddle their way into the faint mist sect just by changing their faces? Aren't they being too naive?" Xiao Wei burst out into laughter, and seemed to recall something in her mind as her eyes flashed. Let the devil-devouring eagle add a couple of his touches. I would really like to see how many among all these brats are talents with sufficient aptitude. The man paused a moment, and then answered with a curt yes. He really didn't know whether all these little fellas would be able to withstand it at all. That night was really very long, like they would not be able to see the sun again tomorrow. The blizzard outside had piled up snow that was several meters deep. Anybody who walked outside would find half their bodies sinking into it. The weather was strange, as it was clearly not yet time for snow to fall, but the blizzard outside seemed determined to bury all life outside. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Something's not right. Ming Yi stood by the window, the thick fox fur wrapped around her. Qing Yu had suppressed the ice poison in her earlier that day, and she was feeling a whole lot better. Even though the weather was bitterly cold now, she did not feel all that tormented anymore. What is it?" Qian Yun heard her words, and she came over to ask. Ming Yi's brows were knitted up. "Look over there at that mountain." The direction the window in this room faced was great, and they could see a far distance standing here. Chapter 144. A thread between life and death. And Ming Yi had just seen, with the inn as the central point, that it was snowing heavily 100 miles around it, covering everything in a white snowy blanket. But gazing further away at the faraway mountain, it was calm and tranquil, without the slightest sign of a snow at all. The peak was bare and barren, a lonesome sight, where only a forest of empty trees shed of all their leaves could be seen. Qian Yun stared with his eyes widened in shock. Looks like Qing Bei was right. This is definitely the work of the Arctic snow wolf. Ming Yi then went on to say, If this snow continues on like this, the inn might really get buried under all this snow. What are they trying to do here? Lan Yu clenched his fists and said angrily, "Is the faint mist sect testing us, or are they out to get us?" Ming Yi's eyes dimmed, and a sharp pain suddenly shot into her mind, her vision bursting into a flash of blood red. "We all might not be able to make it through tonight." "Yi, what did you see?" Qian Yun asked a little worriedly. People of the Soul Cultivators tribe possess a certain ability. They were able to see things that others could not, and were also able to see things that were able to happen. But before she could even reply, a man's low raspy voice sounded, that was tinged with bits of spellbinding enchantment. "I see that there are still some good sprouts from the Soul Cultivators tribe. What a pity." Lan Yu's body tensed up warily as he shouted coldly, "Who is that? Show yourself." That person's voice had sounded like it had spoke just beside his ear. But since when had there been another person's presence inside their room? And they had not noticed a thing. It was probably due to the fact that people from the Soul Cultivators tribe had a naturally strong sense in foreseeing danger, and hence Ming Yi and her companions had not rested at all that night, fearing that something unexpected was going to happen. And just as they predicted, what must come had now come. The candlelight in the room was wavering, and the man hidden in the shadows stirred up a gust of cold wind from under his voluminous cape, which almost blew the weak flickering candle out completely. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. It was a man of incredibly towering height, completely wrapped up in a wide cape that covered him entirely. He wore a wide-brimmed bamboo hat on his head, and only his strong and hard chin could be seen. It was probably because it was not exposed to the sun much, as the skin on that chin was pale and white. "Who are you?" Sweat had spilled into the palms of Ming Yi's tightly clenched fists, but her face still maintained a composed facade as she asked in a calm tone. The man laughed lightly, although his face could not be seen, but his voice was highly pleasing to the ears. "You do not have to worry about that, as tonight, all of you might not be able to survive through this snowstorm, unable to escape the beautiful dreams that I have carefully weaved up for everyone here." Ming Yi's eyes widened. What does he mean by those words? But very soon she would know. Chapter 141. 1. A memory one doesn't want to recall. Whatever was happening on this side was not yet known to Qingyu, but just quiet peace. It was probably because there was some trick in that inn, as no matter how big the commotion outside was, the occupants inside the room did not hear anything. Even the highly carefree Yen, Shiwu had sensed that there was something strange about tonight's snowstorm, and had not slept for once, but remained carefully wary. She looked at the several other quiet people in the room, and hesitated a moment before slowly shuffling over closer to Yen Shiro to ask softly, "What hour is it now?" Yen Shirua, who had her eyes closed in rest, then opened them to gaze at the pitch-dark sky outside, her brows slightly furrowed. "I do not know as well. It's just too strange tonight, and it feels as if a long time has passed. So it should already be the Yin hour, when night is deepest, but it looks like it's now only the Z hour at midnight." Yen Shiwu felt an involuntary chill run up her back. Is the sky never going to turn bright again on this night? It will be the day for the admission trials tomorrow, and if we are held back by this, then all the hard work we have put in for so long will have been for nothing. Hearing Yen Shiwu complaining in frustration incessantly, Qingyu rubbed her temples, feeling a headache coming. She got up from her bed and walked over to the window before she said, "Even if dawn breaks, we might still not be able to leave this place." Upon hearing her words, the others turned their gazes outside at the same time. They saw the snow flurries falling heavily, and the snow piled up outside had already reached half a grown man's height, and half of the inn's doors had become blocked. Yen Shiwu's face turned pale. "It's over, it's all over. We are going to be trapped in here, and this snowstorm will never stop. There are so many people here in this inn, and we'll run out of food and water in just a few days. We'll all then die here." Seeing her look as if the sky was falling, Qingbei stared at her in contempt, before he said in an icy cold voice, "If you continue prattling on with such defeatist words, I'll just throw you out the window right now for you to perish on your own." Ever since the time that the youth had heartlessly left her to fend for herself, whether she lived or died back at Hades Canyon, Yan Shiwu had become highly terrified of him. Hearing him say those words, she became so frightened that she immediately shrank her head into her shoulders and clamped her mouth shut in silence. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. A dark glint flashed in Qingyu's eyes, a brief fleeting moment. Suddenly, the world swirled before her eyes, and the scene she saw changed completely. Qingbei, Yan Shirui and Yan Shiwu had all disappeared. And before her, it all felt so familiar and strange at the same time, like this had happened in her past life. It was a man with a tall, slim figure, his facial features gently pleasing, with the eyes smiling so gently that one would be able to drown in them. Qing, are you being mischievous again? Why are you hiding here and not eating your food? Chapter 141. 2. A memory one doesn't want to recall throughout the large and vast family. Among so many young men and women in there, only this one man called her by this name, Qing, a name so intimate like he was calling out to a lover who shared his bed. Qingyu's body was trembling uncontrollably, so even after so long, she still has not gotten over it completely. Once she heard him calling out to her like that, it immediately elicited all kinds of memories of the past, about how well he had treated her. So well that it made up for the pain she had felt for the loss of her parents. So well that she had given her whole heart to him so willingly, without holding back in the slightest. But why was it that her most sincere and true heart was not enough to compete with the seductive allure of consumer power and high authority? Even the person she had thought would never ever change had turned unscrupulous because of that position. Qingyu tried her very best to shut her eyes. The skin over her slender fingers suddenly turned very pale. The soft sound of a person's breathing sounded right beside her ear, as a man's wide chest held her close in a tight embrace, his voice low and gentle. Qing, you are always trying so hard to be brave, so I just can't help being worried about you. Big brother will always be protecting you. Qingyu did not say a word and did not open her eyes, her long lashes quivering hard, as he emotions surged till she was on the very verge of collapsing. The smile on the man's lips grew deeper. Qing, wait till I ascend to the seat of family head, and will you then be my bride? Let the two of us stand right at this highest position to gaze upon the most beautiful view, and enjoy the supreme power and authority at the peak of the entire world, where everyone shall bow before us, the world finally at our feet. A girl need not be so strong. Girls who are adorably weak are much more lovable. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The man's almost spellbinding lips came closer to her ear, the low and magnetic voice profound and seductive. Big brother will dote on you very much. The true power of the sacred burial arts and the heavenly insights of medicine can only be brought out through my hands. Will you let big brother extract them out from you? The Qing family's two secret treasures, and only the heir was able to possess them. If one sought to extract them, then it could only be done by the copulation of yin and yang. But if the treasures were forcibly extracted, then the body's vitality of the owner of the treasures would suffer grave injuries, their very foundation damaged, to become frail and sickly, and be endlessly reliant on all kinds of medicine. Qingyu's tightly shut eyes had turned red at the rims, feeling so vulnerable and depressed like she never did before. Those violent rise of such highly intense emotions had actually caused the heart of a certain man thousands of miles away to wrench up sharply. His eyes immediately flared open from sleep, the devilishly enchanting violet orbs shining extraordinarily bright. He sat himself up, his fair slender fingers stretching open. A light purple crystal ball the size of a baby's palm flashed incessantly, and he called out in a probing voice, "Little fox." Chapter 141. 3. A memory one doesn't want to recall. Getting no response from the other side, Lu Junyao could not help but knitted up his brows. The crystal ball was a magical communication artifact from Cloud Heaven, and there weren't that many of them throughout the entire Cloud Heaven, so it could be seen from here just how rare it was. But he had not even blinked when he gave Qingyu one. A person just needed to summon up their spirit energy and they would be able to not only speak to the person on the other side, but also to see their faces. He had done that for safety's sake, Lu Junyao had thought. Since he had decided that he would look after Ant Lan's descendants, then he should give it his all, and do the best he could. Even though Qing Yu was merely going to take part in the recruitment trials of an insignificant sect within the low-level realm. But why had he just sensed that the last emotions were in such great turmoil? What could have happened there? Lu Junyao was feeling rather ill at ease, and with a bright glint in his eyes, the inside of the purple crystal ball started to spin and swirl very quickly, and what met his eyes was a scene of snow that was several feet high, and it seemed like the snow was getting heavier and heavier. It's snowing. Lu Junyao looked outside. Besides the cold wind howling outside, there wasn't even a single speck of snow. Interesting. Just who could be up to their tricks? The inside of the crystal ball then flashed, the scene suddenly changing to show the inside of a room. He saw Qing Yu and her companions. He did not pay the others any attention for the moment, but was only looking at the expression on Qing Yu's face, which did not look like things were all right. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her entire body shaking with shivers, and her hands were even slowly rising up to her slender neck, before clutching around it viciously. The tiny face lost all its color right at that moment, turning a frightful greenish white, like she was able to suffocate. The aura around Lu Junyao grew heavy suddenly, growing oppressive like the way it felt before a violent storm broke. Qing Yu could not lie to herself. Even though she hated this person, hated the man who had turned her into a cold and emotionless person, he had once, throughout her entire youth, given her all the love and concern of what kinship was to her. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The man's warm breath from his lips brushed past her ear, opening and closing as he spoke, almost touching her dainty little ear. Qing, be good and stay by my side, will you? No matter whether it's that kid you brought back here or any other man, they will not be able to give you what I can give. In this world, only I am compatible with you. Be good and give yourself to me. Just as the man's lips were right about to touch the young lady's alluring lips, she suddenly curled up the ends of her mouth in a faint smile, a smile of imperceptible meaning. Within the darkness, it was as beautiful as the highly precious night-blooming cereus, that appears fleetingly and disappears almost immediately after. But the stir it caused in a person's heart would not dissipate for a long time. Qing Tianlin, you know what? The young lady's voice was clear and light, and in that silent darkness of night, it seemed like she could hear the sound of his beating heart. What? The man was taken aback. Chapter 141. 4. A memory one doesn't want to recall. Regardless whether it's the real you or this is just you in my dream, you disgust me just the same. A highly callous smile curled up at the edges of Qing Yu's lips, and a boundless rage then shone out ruthlessly from the pair of beautiful and alluring phoenix-like eyes. Her voice was chillingly light, that made one shiver involuntarily. Who gave you permission to pry into my heart so rudely? Stunned surprise appeared on the man's face, and he froze in shock the very next moment. The young lady's hand that was so cold there wasn't the slightest sliver of warmth, then turned into a sharp blade, plunging straight through his heart, and that pair of absolutely emotionless eyes did not even once glance at him, before she burned him up into ashes with a blazing fire. He had never ever thought that things would take such a turn, and he had died without a single trace of him left behind. And the hidden man who was controlling everything suddenly vomited out a great mouthful of blood, his already pale and inhumanly colorless face immediately turning even whiter. His pair of bright jet-black eyes were filled with utter astounded shock. Someone was actually able to break out from the dreams he weaved? And Qing Yu, who had awoken from her dreamy state, then felt as if all her strength had left her, as she collapsed onto the floor with her eyes closed. But the pain that was expected to come with the fall did not come, as a warm embrace caught her and picked her up, holding her tightly. The fiery warmth then drove out the cold chill in her body. Qing Yu slowly opened her eyes, her half-lowered eyelids looking lazily languid and enchanting, especially when the color of her complexion was not looking too great at that moment, seeming a little weak and pale, just like that of an injured little animal that sought comfort cuddled in her owner's arms. Why have you come? Qingyu's voice was a little low and raspy. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Lu Junyao cradled the young lady's slender waist, that felt like it would crumble if he gripped her too tightly, as he helped her to the edge of the bed for her to sit down. He opened his mouth to say without showing emotion in his voice, I just saw a foolish little fox who almost strangled herself to death, so I came over to see what got you so worked up. Those words were put across so lightly with utter indifference, but only he himself knew how fast he had moved, ripping through the dimensional space to come here. Hearing that undisguised sarcasm from him, Qingyu's mouth split as she laughed softly. You've got to be kidding. I will never do something as stupid as that. Is that so? Lu Junyao's eyes smiled mirthlessly as he looked at the little fox in persistent denial. Then can you stand up and walk a couple of steps for me to see? Haha. In such a state of utter exhaustion, it is clear that it was caused by having just over-depleted your mental strength. Really don't know what she saw just now that could affect her so much. Fortunately, she has already broken out of that predicament on her own. Chapter 142. 1. Legitimate self-defense. Hearing the man's mocking tone, Qingyu glanced at the man expressionlessly, clearly not falling for the taunt, but just continued to lean weakly against his shoulder as she said indifferently, Don't think just because you caught my fall that I will then be grateful to you. Lu Junyao could not help but laugh and then replied, It's the least I should do. No need for any gratitude. After taking a little time to gather herself and recover a bit, some color returned to Qingyu's face. That was when Qingyu noticed that Qing Bei and the others had also fallen into a dreamy state and had not yet broken out of it. The expressions on their faces varied. Lu Junyao then said, You don't have to worry about them. You have already caused the hidden person behind this to suffer a severe backlash, and they would not be in much danger while they are still caught in their dreams. Maybe just have their minds ravaged a little at most, which would toughen them up. Hearing that, the air around Qingyu suddenly fell by quite a few good degrees. No matter whether this was to test them or not, but this was just too much. The memory that had been sealed and laid in dust for so long, after so many years where she had come to be able to gradually put it down. But that person had come to dig up this most painful memory once more. The name Qing Tianlin always caused her emotions to surge up so easily. The young lady's exquisitely beautiful face almost looked like a layer of frost had formed over its smooth skin, colder than the howling snowy blizzard raging outside. Her lips parted, her voice devoid of any emotion. Lu Junyao, help me find that person. He had seen her smiling with joy and admonish in rage, seen her deviously crafty and sly, but to look like she was out to shake the heavens and tear up the earth like this, it was the first time that Lu Junyao was seeing it. He could not help but recall her face that he had seen earlier in the crystal ball, that had been so frail almost to the point of collapse. Just what could have caused her to be in so much despair? Although he did not know what she saw, but recalling how weakened and frail she had looked, Lu Junyao knew that he did not want to see that a second time. This young lady was born to look so proud like this, and looking pitifully weak should not ever appear on that face. One who dared to order Lu Junyao so matter-of-factly, throughout the entire world, it was feared that it was only just Qingyu alone. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The man seemed rather helpless, but what was seen between his brows could only be doting indulgence. The blizzard continued to howl outside, the bare trees covered in a thick blanket of white as they waved to and fro under the powerful wind, moving strangely under the darkness of the night. Someone hidden in a secret room on the ground floor was telling Qiao Wei something. Suddenly paused, and his eyes turned to gaze towards the door. The other people in the room immediately stopped talking, and the door was then opened in the next instant, letting in a bone-biting icy chill from outside. A tall and well-built figure came staggering in through the door, and then seemed to be trying to brace himself up for a long while before he fell on one knee to the ground, unable to withstand it any longer, as he vomited out a mouthful of blood. Qiao Wei and the others stared with their eyes wide, in utter disbelief. Devil-devouring eagle, how did you even get injured? Who could have done it? Chapter 142. 2. Legitimate self-defense. The devil-devouring eagle's body, that was shrouded under the wide black cape, was already soaked in cold sweat. The agony he was feeling from the backlash that he suffered was causing the meridians in every part of his body to be tightly stretched, almost robbing him of his voice. But even though that was the case, he still managed to eke out the words. Quickly. Leave now. Listening carefully, his voice even sounded like it was trembling. Among the four of them, although the devil-devouring eagle's cultivation was the lowest, but it was more than enough to deal with the entire bunch of little runts here. Moreover, he also held an amazing profession as a dreamweaver. Once it started, within a 100-meter radius, not even beasts and animals would be able to escape the dreams he wove. And in those dreams, he was fully dominant. But why had he come back all injured and was urging them to leave? Could it be that among the bunch of brats, there really was a peerless prodigy that they had missed out on? In that short period of time that they stood there stunned in a daze, they came to lose their best chance of escaping. The shade on the devil-devouring eagle's face turned uglier, and he vomited out another mouthful of blood. A soft voice without any emotion then sounded from outside the door. The few of you here have really made me see all of you in a new light. That voice. Xiao Wei subconsciously lifted her eyes. Just behind the devil-devouring eagle, she saw two figures standing there, partially shrouded in the darkness, as they came walking out into the light. The slim petite figure in front was the young lady who had left a very good impression on her. And as for the tall-figured man behind her, Xiao Wei's face looked as if her soul had been sucked out of her, and she immediately turned away. That man's eyes were just too terrifying to look at. The young lady's face was also no longer as gentle and polite-looking as the time they had first met, the expression rather cold. Xiao Wei kept a smile on her face and said, "Congratulations, young lady. You are the first person to pass the test." "Is that so?" Qing Yu's face did not show even a ripple of emotion as her gaze swept over the few people inside the room, her tone of voice highly calm. Her slender fingers then gripped upon the devil-devouring eagle's clothes, easily picking up the man, who was a lot taller and bigger than she was, up from the ground. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Since I have passed the test, then I will be taking this person here. The smile on Xiao Wei's face congealed. What do you mean? Qing Yu snorted with cold derision. Having dug deep into my heart, and trapping me within a dream. Just for that reason alone, there is no reason for him to live any longer. Little young lady, being so haughty with your ways will definitely make you suffer consequences. Xiao Wei said with a soft laugh. This was what the Faint Mist sect leader wanted. So even if you have any grievance against that, you've got the wrong person here. Moreover, no matter how strong you are, the rest of us here are not people you can afford to trifle with easily. Those words were delivered with a tinge of threat in them. Qing Yu arched up an eyebrow, and then opened her mouth in response. Of course I know that you guys are not to be trifled with. So don't you see that I brought help with me? I am definitely having all his powers destroyed here today. Chapter 142. 3. Legitimate self-defense help? Xiao Wei then subconsciously looked up at the tall man behind her. He was very tall, and half of his body was still cast in shadows, but his pair of violet eyes shone with a brilliant light within the darkness of night that made her heart beat fast. The Arctic snow wolf was a thin-figured man with sharp, intelligent looks. When he heard those words that felt so much like a taunt, he just could not hold back his impulse at that instant, but said to the young lady, "Little lass, you are courting your own death." Immediately upon saying that nimble body moved at a speed faster than the eye could see as he lunged straight towards Qing Yu. "Stop!" Xiao Wei's eyes flared wide, quickly shouting out to stop him. But it was already too late. The Arctic snow wolf's fingers shot viciously towards the young lady's thin, slender neck in a malevolent strike, murder rising in his heart. Qing Yu stood unmoving in her spot, neither dodging nor running away, but just looked squarely at the attack that was riddled with openings. The long arm of the man behind her whipped out and pulled her into his arms. Before the Arctic snow wolf had even gotten close, he was thrown back by a powerful and explosive force, which sent his body crashing into the hard pillar all the way at the back of the hidden secret room, and a mouthful of blood immediately spurted out from his mouth, as he lay weakly on the ground not moving an inch, unable to stand up at all. Old Third. Money Leopard's face paled, and he quickly went over to his companion, putting his hand on his wrist to check his condition. His face immediately turned an even uglier shade. He looked up mournfully to meet Xiao Wei's worried gaze and said slowly, pausing at every single word, "All of Old Third's meridians have been severed." Xiao Wei felt as if she had fallen into an icy lake. Her eyes filled with terror as she stared at the mysterious man whose eyes were lowered as he questioned the young lady in his arms if she was all right. She had seen it clearly just now. That man had definitely not even made any move to strike at all. Just as Arctic Snow Wolf had come to get close to him, the man had merely just glanced expressionlessly at him. Just a single glance and Arctic Snow Wolf had all his cultivation destroyed, turned into a useless shell. How terrifying! Though peerless pugilists with unparalleled power have been born in these constellation lands throughout the years, but never had there been one that could compare to this man's attainment. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Just who is this man? Qingyu, who had been about to make her move, was similarly stunned as she looked at the scene before her. She then looked up with displeasure in her eyes and asked, "What are you doing?" Lu Junyao's face was looking at her matter-of-factly as he replied, "Purely legitimate self-defense." "Someone was lunging straight at me. Am I supposed to just stand there to let him strike me? Isn't your self-defense a little too overdone? Moreover, he was clearly coming right at me. That single retaliation from him would surely cause that man to spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair. She had merely brought him along for grandstanding purposes. Now he has really done it, having completely crippled the man." Chapter 142. 4. Legitimate self-defense. Looking at the young lady, who was seemingly rather angry, Lu Junyao's gaze turned sharp and his voice was low as he said, "I told myself that I will take care of you for Aunt Lan, so I will not allow you to even come close to getting hurt at all." His stern and serious demeanor caused Qingyu to be stumped for words, and she could do nothing but feel a little frustrated inside. She had merely wanted to teach the devil-devouring eagle a lesson, but Lu Junyao had instead completely destroyed the Arctic Snow Wolf's cultivation, so she felt like she shouldn't find any more trouble with them anymore. Seeing how jittery with trepidation Xiao Wei and her companions were, angry but not daring to voice out, Qingyu suddenly came to pity them. That fella Lu Junyao had really been too tyrannical, never giving a thought to how severe and heavy-handed a single strike from him would be. Which was not merely heavy, but the guy was now barely able to breathe. "This is a spirit-strengthening elixir. It should be able to help him," Qingyu said as she handed Xiao Wei a red porcelain bottle. "I had originally not meant much harm, but a person would always have some part of their past that they would not be willing to revisit. But since things have turned out like this, I will not pursue it any further." Xiao Wei had taken extra good care of her in the past 2 days, and the room she was staying in with her companions was the best one in the inn, kept much warmer than the other rooms. Hence when the snow fell, the cold the few of them had felt in their room was quite a lot less than the others as well. Although it could be said that Xiao Wei had accepted benefits from the young lady, she had really treated the young lady quite well in here. Xiao Wei was taken aback by her actions a moment before she then accepted the tiny porcelain bottle. She immediately gave it to Money Leopard for him to feed it to Arctic Snow Wolf. Her eyes were rather confused as she went on to ask Qingyu, "With the kind of powers you possess, why have you come to the Faint Mist sect?" Although she had not seen the young lady make any moves, the aura emanating from a powerful pugilist could never be completely masked. Moreover, she was acquainted with a friend with such terrifying cultivation, so how could she possibly be anyone ordinary? She could very well just go to the White Fin continent. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Hearing that, Qingyu curved up the ends of her lips, and her eyes grew deep and profound. "Going to the Faint Mist sect is naturally not to further my cultivation, but there a reason that makes it a must for me. One would not be allowed to come out for 2 years after being accepted into the Faint Mist sect." She really didn't have so much time to waste in there, as her ultimate aim was Cloud Heaven itself. The place filled with so much mystery. Being so severely injured, the Arctic snow wolf was naturally unable to control the weather anymore. And the snow that had fallen for a good half of the night finally stopped, as it all began to thaw. Many of them were not able to break out from the dreams that the devil-devouring eagle had weaved, as it was just entirely human for them to be plagued by greed and past sins. In just one night, among the several hundred people who came to participate in the recruitment trials, only half remained. Chapter 143. 1. Beauty is made only in close proximity. Some had crumbled, unable to pick themselves up again after falling into the dreams, and some had suddenly woken up, but were unable to endure the strict and severe rules the sect had set, voluntarily choosing to give up on the opportunity on their own. Besides Qingyu, everyone had probably been affected by the night's events more or less, but quite a number of people still chose to persevere. Today was the day of the admission trials, and they all woke up very early. Although their numbers have been greatly reduced, it did not seem to affect them all that much when they gathered in the main hall to eat breakfast quietly. And they were told that someone from the Faint Mist sect would be coming to bring them up the mountain. But the strange thing was that breakfast this morning was unexpectedly sumptuous. It had only been just plain buns and porridge, that was so thin you could use it as a mirror in the past 2 days. But today there were crystal dumplings, swallowtail roll, lotus paste cake, and 2 exquisite plates of crunchy side dishes with sweet delicious fine-grained porridge. When everyone saw the spread for breakfast, all of them suspected whether they were just hallucinating. Was this to be their last meal? How could it be so scrumptious? Compared to the food today, what they had been eating the past 2 days was pure pig feed. When have they ever eaten something so hard to swallow in their lives? They really wouldn't have eaten it if there was another choice. So when they all gazed upon the spread laid out, the expression on everyone's faces quickly grew wary, afraid that this would be the last meal for them. Xiao Wei coughed awkwardly a couple of times and then announced, "What was done before was just to test all of you. Although this inn of mine is located in such a remote and desolate place, we are still capable of providing you with all these food. So everyone just eat up and enjoy it." Everyone then relaxed their guard. But Qingyu's table was destined to be unable to enjoy any peace today, for no other reason than the fact that a certain man had decided to remain here since last night, even coming to sit himself right next to her so naturally, gracefully taking his time to enjoy breakfast. His tall and muscular figure together with a face crafted by the hands of the gods, that was so handsome it angered both mortals and deities alike. His seductive violet eyes, filled with such a mysterious otherworldly air, completely drew everyone's gazes to them. Seated on the opposite side, Qingbei, Yan Shiro and Yan Shiwu just sat there stunned, not knowing when this man had come to appear here, their faces mournful as they stared at Qingyu. Sensing the gaze that was both perplexed and aggrieved coming from the young lady, Lu Junyao paused in his actions and glanced at her. "What's wrong?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Are you really that free and idle nowadays?" Qingyu asked him. Lu Junyao lifted an eyebrow, looking like he did not understand. "We will be going to the Faint Mist sect in a while. Are you intending to follow us there as well?" Qingyu asked him softly. This man was after all a respected entity from Cloud Heaven, no matter how you put it. It's fine if he chooses to stay here in the low-level realms idling his time away doing nothing. But when he always comes hovering around before her face whenever he felt like it, she has to start asking whether he is really that bored and has nothing better to do. Qingyu's words were clear and direct, which really meant to chase him away. Chapter 143. 2. Beauty is made only in close proximity. Lu Junyao laughed in a soft low voice, his violet eyes sparkling, bright with mirth. "I don't think I've told you that the gathered cloud loft has moved here. It's on the peak right across the Faint Mist sect." Qingyu was dazed for a moment before she could react. "When did it move here?" "Yesterday." Qingyu could not help but twitch a corner of her mouth. "What are you up to again this time?" No wonder she had not seen Bai Jiyan, who was never seen too far apart from him. It's because he had come here as well. Hearing that, Lu Junyao cupped his chin in his palm and looked at her smilingly to say, I heard that the days spent practicing cultivation in the Faint Mist sect is very dry, so I guess their disciples live a rather dull and boring life here. But now, all of them can sneak out for some fun at the fragrance court, so isn't that just great? The twitch at the corner of Qing Yu's mouth then grew more intense. He really thinks that wanting to get those pure-minded disciples who practiced abstinence to seek out fun at his establishment was really a good idea. If the sect's elders were to hear that, they would surely die from a blood vessel bursting in their heads from rage. And wouldn't moving the gathered cloud loft so openly without a care here raise any suspicions from others? And the Faint Mist sect did not have any opinions on that? It was not known what special method the fella had employed to achieve that. So from today onwards you guys will remain here? Qing Yu glanced at him to ask. Lu Junyao smiled and nodded. You can come look for me anytime you need something. Why does she feel like this fella had moved the gathered cloud loft because of her? Qing Bei silently watched the two banter so familiarly with each other, and for some unknown reason, a strange feeling rose up in his heart, but was unable to put a finger on it. After breakfast was done, several disciples in the sect's white uniform came to the inn, and one person among them was actually rather familiar looking. Upon looking more closely, it was then discovered that it was Jin Zhe Hao they had seen during the sect's internal trials in the mystifying Boglands, whose consciousness fell under the Scarlet Land's 8 demons controlled to thrash up Lian Xiaojia, that was of a higher cultivation level almost half to death. It was wondered whether he was punished when he returned back to the Faint Mist sect. And it was quite obvious that Jin Zhe Hao was acquainted with the proprietress of the Inn Xiao Wei, his manners highly respectful. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The two of them talked for a while, and it was not know what Xiao Wei said to him, when the expression on Jin Zhe Hao's face looked rather amazed before he swept his eyes over the crowd without people noticing. On the way to the Faint Mist sect, several curious disciples secretly went up before Jin Zhe Hao and said, May I ask our senior fellow disciple, whether you are acquainted with the lady boss of the inn? We were wondering if she is one of the Faint Mist sect's elders? Jin Zhe Hao raised an eyebrow. Her position in the sect is much higher than an elder. Everyone then recalled back to the day when someone had challenged the lady boss, saying that she was guilty of negligence, and that the Faint Mist sect would definitely punish her for it. In the end, the lady boss had just arrogantly replied, Who in the Faint Mist sect would dare to? Chapter 143. 3. Beauty is made only in close proximity from the way things looked. She must really be somebody in the sect. Everyone sighed out in relief. Lucky for them, they did not offend the lady boss. Lu Junyao had received a message from a subordinate back in the inn, and had left first. It was only then that Yin Shiro and the others dared to speak up. The man's aura had been too overpowering, and they had found it hard to breathe, just by being in such close proximity to him. Having just awoken from the weaved dreams, everyone was completely unaware of the frightening dangers they were all in last night, thinking that it was all just a bad nightmare. Close to the mountain where the Faint Mist sect sat, layers of barriers had been set up to prevent a recurrence of the events today at the recruitment trials, like when the Scarlet Land's 8 demons had come to stir up trouble, so they wanted to ensure that that would not happen. But it seemed like no one dared to come create trouble here today, not even the Carefree Valley, who always went against the Faint Mist sect, and no one came to compete for disciples like they had done before. It was for no other reason than the fact that it had been announced that this year's recruitment trials would be helmed by the Faint Mist sect's 5th-ranked disciple, the person who set the miraculous record of 300 consecutive wins, Su Liemo, as one of the trial's invigilators. He was a lunatic whose cultivation was so maniacally powerful. So who would dare go court death by going there to pick a fight? That great lord loves a good fight the most, and if anyone was to really go challenge him, it was thought he would be most happy to oblige. Of course, the most important thing was that there was news saying the most highly skilled first-ranked pugilist of legend in the Faint Mist sect, the founder of the Deviant Department, Feng Tianhen, who had been undergoing training in the upper realms for many years, had actually returned this time. That person was a legendary character held in high reverence in the hearts of the Faint Mist sect's disciples. According to disciples who had been in the sect for 7 to 8 years, they have only seen Su Liemo a few times, but have never seen any of the other top 5 ranked disciples before. Not to mention the number 1 ranked of the inner circle. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. So when news of that spread, the Faint Mist sect's disciples broke out in a rousing cheer, their hearts excited and filled with anticipation. That had quickly deterred anyone who thought to stir up trouble on this day here, and they had no choice but to know their own place. Sigh. I have never seen these guys get so excited every time I came back. Our chief is really so much more popular as expected. Su Liemo was dressed in a cool suit of black like always, with that unremarkable-looking old sword held to his chest, and he complained when he saw that the disciples around them as they walked past had undisguised excitement in their eyes. Luo Lanzi beside him burst into laughter, his gentle and handsome countenance becoming even more mesmerizing as he laughed. Are you really feeling sour that they did not welcome you in the same way? Su Liemo's lips stiffened. I wouldn't care about such things. I am just worried that they are getting their hopes up for nothing. Who knows whether the chief is really going to come back? It might really just be unfounded rumors, as I have not seen him for several years already. Chapter 143. 4. Beauty is made only in close proximity. Luo Lanzi lifted an eyebrow and then said, It was the sect leader himself who said that, so I do not think that it is false. Maybe that fella is already tired of staying out there for so long, and just want to come back to the sect to pick a few good sprouts to nurture. The deviant department only has 11 people now, and it is really rather lacking in numbers. Su Liemo shook his head. He is so picky that I think there wouldn't be a single one that he is satisfied with in the entire batch. Oh, didn't I hear you say that you discovered a youth with rather good potential back in the mystifying boglands? Luo Lanzi suddenly asked. He's really quite good. And not does that fella possess some great skills. It seemed like he was adequate in medicine as well. But that does not mean that the chief will think that he's good enough. Su Liemo then shook his head. Moreover, Elder Jean said that he would definitely get that kid into the elixir cultivators department. So the moment he appears, Elder Jean will immediately sink his claws into the kid. Elder Jean was also one of the invigilators of this year's trials. But the problem now is, how can you guys be sure that the youth would definitely come to the Faint Mist sect? Luo Lanzi then asked incisively. Su Liemo was taken aback a moment. It seems like he really had not considered that possibility at all. Today was also the day the Limitless sect, and the Carefree Valley, would be holding their recruitment trials. When they got to the mountaintop where the Faint Mist sect was at, quite a number of people were already seen moving about at the entrance. Disciples were assigned to issue number tags to the participants, and after they got the tags, they were told that only 10 would enter at a time to have their gifts assessed in the first round. The mysteriousness of the Faint Mist sect was well known to the outside world. If none of their disciple inside came out to lead the way, no one would be able to go inside, unable to even locate the entrance. And at that moment, everyone had stopped before a wide and torrential waterfall, and were looking a little puzzled. All that they saw was just the waterfall before them, and there was nothing else. So where could the entrance be? Qing Yu and the others got their number tags, and as it was given out in a random order, so the numbers were not in sequence. Ming Yi got a number that was further towards the back, and when she walked over beside Qing Yu, she saw the number Qing Yu held in her hand, which coincidentally was together with hers. She pressed her lips together in a smile and said, Looks like we will be going inside together. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Hearing that, Qing Yu then glanced at the number in Ming Yi's hand and smiled at her. On the other hand, after Yan Shiwu took her number tag and came back to the group, her face looked like the sky was about to fall. Yan Shiro asked with great concern, What's wrong? The others also turned to look inquisitively at her, and Yan Shiwu just raised a trembling hand to show the number tag she held. which was a clear and bristling number 3. Everyone in the group then uniformly stiffened their lips. To think that she was to be among the first group to go in, to get a number right at the forefront, her luck was really quite amazing. Chapter 144. 1. Mournful-looking face. Yin Shiwu was almost going to burst into tears. What do I do? I'm so nervous that my mind is completely blank. What am I going to do if I am immediately disqualified? If old Senior Qin finds out that you did not even make it through the gift assessment round, he will surely fly into a big rage. Yen Shiro said softly to her when she saw Yen Shiwu looking so lost and confused. For the past half year, Qin Fong had been helping them train to raise their cultivation, and had been exceptionally meticulous with Yen Shiwu, who possessed the lowest gift. Her powers had increased by quite a bit now, and if she gets disqualified, then all of Qin Fong's sweat and blood would have been wasted. Yen Shiwu was imagining old Senior Qin's stern, darkened face, and she immediately felt a chill run through her. No can do. She must not be disqualified. Thinking about that, Yen Shiwu quickly regained her focus. After everyone got their number tags, 2 disciples from the inner circle then walked to go stand before the waterfall, before throwing something very quickly into it. The very next second, something incredible then happened. The torrential waters of the waterfall crashing down seemed to have frozen in place, becoming a beautiful and scenic painting. The place suddenly so quiet, without the sound of water crashing down. A loud swishing then sounded as the waterfall then parted in the middle, slowly opening up. 3 bold and stately-looking characters that read Faint Mist Sect was then revealed behind. Upon the thick and heavy limestone doors were 2 great lifelike carvings in the shape of a ferocious beast's head with their fangs bared, staring malevolently at everyone there. The 2 disciples then walked forward to each hold a bronze ring right below the beast heads, before they knocked lightly with them, like there was a secret code. As the knocking sounds came to a stop, the great limestone walls then swung open laboriously, and the misty realm of deities, that was the Faint Mist Sect, then slowly appeared before everyone's eyes. Everyone could not help but widen their eyes at the sight. So the legend that says the Faint Mist Sect was a place where deities lived was not just rumors. This place was just too beautiful for words. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Several young women in their white sect uniforms came walking over slowly across the stone bridge as they approached, their figures slim and graceful, with beautiful-looking countenances, which caused the young and hot-blooded youths standing outside to stare in awe. The women in the Faint Mist Sect were indeed different from girls out in the outside world. They all looked like goddesses, every single one of them stunning in looks and demeanor. The thought that they would be staying together with these people who looked like goddesses in future, the hearts of everyone outside could not help but soar. Number 1 to 10, follow me inside now. One of the sect disciples opened her mouth to say, and then turned to walk inside. Yen Shiwu took a deep breath and silently encouraged herself inside. But just before she took a step inside, she turned to glance with pitiful eyes like an abandoned puppy at the still calm and composed Qingyu, and Qingyu gave her an encouraging smile in return. Chapter 144. 2. Mournful-looking face. Yen Shiwu immediately perked up, feeling highly inspired. She raised her head high and puffed up her chest, full of confidence as she went walking inside. Although she did not know the reason why, but Qingyu always made her feel safe and secure, like just getting her affirmation alone was enough for her to pass the first round. People took turns to go in 10 at a time. The strange thing was whenever a person went in, the 2 beast heads on the limestone doors would flash with a blue light. What is that? Yen Shiro asked a little puzzledly. Ming Yi beside her then opened his mouth to explain. That is to determine that the people taking part in the trials are within the prescribed age range, and whether they are carrying any forbidden elixirs or artifacts that could assist in raising their cultivation levels. If anything abnormal is found, the eyes of the beast heads will then turn red. So I see. Yen Shiro nodded in understanding. Qingyu looked on with interest at the highly lifelike beast heads with a measuring gaze, and she could not help but marvel at the fantastic and mystical things they have in this world. To think that they already have such advanced instruments in this era. Qingyu. The cold voice of a girl suddenly sounded behind her. The expression on Qingyu's face turned to one of surprise as she spun around with smiles in her eyes. Lai Lai, I thought that you were not coming. Mu Lai, who had previously agreed to come to the Faint Mist sect together with Qing, you had come in late, due to matters that cropped up at the last minute. Having not seen her for half a year, Mu Lai's demeanor had become a little more steady and restrained, and felt a little more imposing. She had completely tidied up the entire Mu family in the past half year, and Mu Qingtian had been bedridden for a few months before his condition improved, so all the pressure had fallen entirely onto her. Although she was just a young lady who was 18, her nickname as the Demoness was not given to her for nothing. She was decisive and resolute, eradicating even kin who stood against her. Now, the Mu family both feared and respected this young lord of theirs. Even if they were to manage to defeat Mu Qingtian, this young lady has shown that she was even more terrifying than her father, so who would still dare to try any tricks? Not only did no one dare to have any other thoughts about the Mu family clan anymore, they had become even more concerned for Mu Qingtian's well-being and safety than Mu Lai herself. The young lady was dressed in full black like before, a tall and striking figure with a cold and icy aura. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. When she came walking in closer, Qingyu then lifted up an eyebrow in further surprise. Lai Lai, you've advanced in level. She had still been at the 8th level of the silver grade, as an elixir cultivator 6 months ago, but she was now at the peak of the 9th level. A very faint smile formed at the ends of Mu Lai's lips. I broke through 2 months ago, but have been stuck here since, unable to progress any further. That is already very good. Breaking through the grades and levels for an elixir cultivator isn't anything like the way it is for martial arts pugilists. Every single level is a great chasm for an elixir cultivator to break through, and you actually attained 3 whole levels in a matter of 6 months. If all those elixir cultivators were to know this, they would surely call you an absolute maniac. Qingyu said with an amused smile. Chapter 144. 3. Mournful-looking face. Mu Lai smiled along with Qingyu's words, unable to deny them. She was indeed more talented than most ordinary elixir cultivators, but when it came to real maniacal gift, who could compare with someone like Qingyu? Ming Yi watched the close intimacy shared by the two people from the side, and was a little surprised. It was after quite a good while before she opened her mouth to say, "Could this lady here be the elixir cultivator family clan's young Lord Mu?" She had tagged along together with her elder brother and a few elders to go pay a visit to that elixir cultivator family clan a few years ago, and she remembered that the Mu family's young lord was highly aloof and not easy to get close to, a person with a cold personality. Never had she ever thought that she would see such an amiable side of her here today. Hearing that, Mu Lai turned her eyes to look at her, looking a little puzzled. "And you are?" As expected, not only was the young lord cold and haughty, her nose was always up in the air, never bothering to remember people she was not concerned with. And the only person that she really remembered very well was only just Qingyu alone, whom she admired wholeheartedly. Upon seeing that, Qingyu came forward smilingly to introduce them. "This here is the Soul Cultivators tribe's Ming Yi, and you should have heard of her before." Mu Lai nodded her head, and seemed to recall something. "You are Ming Jing's younger sister, and you guys came to the Mu family looking for medicine 3 years ago." The Soul Cultivators tribe and the Mu family were rather friendly with each other, and they had always maintained a cordial relationship. Mu Lai and Ming Jing were rather good friends, and he had naturally mentioned his younger sister, that he doted on very much to Mu Lai. "I wouldn't have thought that young Lord Mu would remember me," Ming Yi said beamingly, her 2 adorable dimples showing upon her fair-skinned cheeks, pretty and charming. "Just call me Mu Lai. There is no such thing as young lord, or whatever like it once we are in the Faint Mist sect," Mu Lai said matter-of-factly. "All right." On the other side, the people who have been led inside to have their gifts assessed were brought to a wide and expansive hall that stood completely empty without anyone else in there. Senior Aren't we supposed to have our gifts assessed? But there isn't even a gift-sorting rock in here at all. A youth with delicate features said in a weak voice. To that, the inner circle disciple raised an eyebrow to look at the youth and replied, "Oh, we have indeed always used the gift-sorting rock for the assessment, but we've changed it, and we'll be using a different method this year. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. They changed it." The participants looked at each other with mournful faces. If they are not using the gift-sorting rock, then how are they going to be assessed? Starting from the most basic comprehension of the elements. Within a cup of tea's time, the people who are able to first decipher the kinds of elemental power presently here in this vast empty hall will pass this round. Once the disciples' words came out, if it was said that they were all confused just now, then they were all utterly baffled now. What is going on here? What does gift assessment have to do with comprehension of the elements at all? Isn't that an ability that only people who were just starting to practice martial arts would need to learn? Or were they being toyed with here? Chapter 144. 4. Mournful-looking face. Seeing all kinds of thought going through their minds in everyone's faces, the disciple then said in explanation, "The most basic foundation of a warrior is their grasp of their elemental powers, and I believe all of you would have gone through this before. If you are able to do extremely well in this most simplest of tasks, it just shows that you are not that far off to achieving greater things. But while the task might seem very simple, it is not something that everyone is capable of doing. In this great hall now, it holds energy from 3 different elements. That will also mean that only 3 of you will remain from among you, and whoever identifies them first will be deemed to have passed." Why was it already so hard in the very first round? No one told them that the gift assessment round had been upgraded to such a sadistic level at all. They were catching them completely by surprise here. Just 3 among 10 will advance. That's just too cruel. And what the participants did not know was that in that vast empty hall, an array had been set up, and the invigilators chosen for the trials were already seated there to watch them. But the participants were just not able to see the people inside the barrier array. This was a suggestion brought up by Suliemo to prevent the participants from being unable to perform to their normal potential. So it would be better if the little kids did not see the invigilators. Seated on Sulimo's left was Elder Jean, and he was watching the people in the vast hall with a stern face. Seeing that, Suliemo gave a light laugh and then said, "Elder Jean, do you think that the kid you thought was good would come?" Elder Jean turned to glance at him and said confidently, "Definitely." Suliemo raised an eyebrow in amusement. "So certain. My judgment is naturally correct. The first time I laid my eyes on that youth, I already knew that he would become one of our faint mist sect's disciples." Elder Jean replied. Suliemo stifled a laugh. This old man says it as if he's clairvoyant. Can he really predict the future? Although he hopes that the kid will come to the faint mist sect as well. Besides Elder Jean and Suliemo as the trial's invigilators, there was also Elder Yen among the 12 elders, the first disciple of the Soul Cultivators Department Ming Jing, and the lady seated on the extreme right with stunning looks, her demeanor aloof with a beautiful and enchanting 5-petal flower on her forehead. Who else could it be but Yen Ning Luo? As the female with the strongest cultivation among the inner disciples, who was highly favored by the sect leader, she was also made to be one of the invigilators. She was not paying any attention to the talk about the youth between Suliemo and Elder Jean at that moment, her face expressionless. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The reason she was sitting here was also because Qing Yu and the few others would be coming today. She had not thought that the idiot Yen, Shiwu would come in together with the first batch of participants. With that kind of aptitude, she would not be able to even make it through the first round, and would just embarrass herself. She thought back about the secret letter she had received from her mother some time ago, sent from the Eternal Peace Duke Manor, and her clear eyes darkened almost imperceptibly. She had originally only wanted Yin Qingyu to know her place and back off, to make her leave the faint mist sect on her own accord. But she had not thought that she would humiliate Mother so badly, and that was a direct challenge to her. Since that was the case, then Qing, you cannot blame her for being heartless. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.